I got a phone call from Popper who spoke to me about potentially joining the Wanderers. Players are rolling up in Mercedes-Benz and Bugattis and all sorts of cars, and training a couple times a week for an hour. They rock up to training 5 minutes before the session starts.
There's a lot of A-League clubs that don't want it to happen because they don't want the threat of being, relegated down to a second division.
This was not meant to happen. This could not happen. This is happening.
Welcome back to another episode of The Coach's Son Parks the Bus. We've got a very special guest here with us today. Three-time A-League champion, Golden Boot winner, and Socceroo, Alex Brosque. Welcome to The Coach's Son.
Thanks, boys. Good to be on the show.
Well, let's get right into it. All right, so usually how we start these things is we just jump right into sort of your footballing journey and how the game came about.
Pretty simple. I mean, I wasn't given a choice, really. My old man, Uruguayan background, so as soon as I could walk, basically I could play football in his eyes. I guess that's the mentality over there. So I got a pair of boots and that was it. I mean, not that I remember that far, but when I did start eventually, I think I was about 4 as a youngster, and things were different back then. I mean, there was no mini fields and mini football and, taking care of kids all that much. Back then it was just throw them straight on the big field and see how we go. So given my size, my age, I was thrown in goals in my first year. I think we had a fairly decent team. So the idea was he won't touch the ball won't get down there anyway. And in the meantime, just train him and whatever. So I started my first year in goal, didn't go all that well, obviously. And sort of I never really looked back. I mean, the game itself, I any minute I could, whether it was at home or with mates, I was looking for an excuse to kick the ball around and doing exactly that. So I love playing, and I think, looking at my journey, at my career and everywhere I played, I was someone who, always enjoyed being around mates, around family. And when I look at choices that I made and the path that I sort of went on, and playing the majority of my career here and my, the moments that I had overseas and when I came back and things like that, I think a lot of the decisions I made were based around that, around being with friends and the enjoyment I had of playing with a good group of players and local players and guys that I felt comfortable with, and that always sort of got the best out of me anyway. So that's where it started for me, just as a young kid out, Western Sydney, where I grew up, where I still live. Park football for a local South American based team called Fairfield Athletics for, most of my junior years, and in between the seasons, I'd play a bit of indoor as well, and love playing indoor. I couldn't get enough of it. And again, back then it was something that coaches were trying to get us to stop doing. They almost gave us ultimatums sometimes that in the off season you weren't allowed to play indoor soccer. It was bad for your knees. It was this and was that. But for me, I loved it, and I think technically how much it helps players improve. When you look in South America, all players are playing. And I guess that's where they've gone now with the small-sided games. The idea is to get touches and improve your game in a smaller field so that when you get to a big field, you've got that technique and that understanding of the game and that awareness as well. So for me back then, playing indoor, I loved it. And it just kept me playing football year round, So eventually, I thought it was probably time to take that next step and play, look to, go up into rep football. And I joined Southern Districts, who again are out in Western Sydney, and stayed with Southern Districts from under 12s to 16s. And then the natural sort of progression from there, given Southern Districts back then as a club was linked with Marconi, we played out of the Marconi backfields, was, to try out for the the Colts teams and the National Youth League teams of Marconi, of which I made and played for a season before going to the AIS, then coming back to the old NSL with Marconi. So that was, my journey into football and how I started and how I sort of got into a professional environment.
You mentioned a bit earlier how you were chucking goals. I'm assuming that was when you were 4 or 5 years old.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you wouldn't have done that throughout the years. I'm interested to know, did you stand out when you were playing in your juniors? Like, were you always the best one in your team? Because obviously we've followed you through your A-League career, being one of the best, if not the best A-League player of all time. Were you always a gun growing up?
Look, I had my stages. I think very early on, obviously not just starting. I new to the game and learning the game, but I think from about under 6s, under 7s, through to about 11s, and again, I was playing park football at the time for a Uruguayan club out here. I look back at the team that we had, and probably look, I wouldn't say I was a gun or stood out maybe compared to some teams, but I definitely think I was in, amongst the better players in my team at that early age. I was quite quick and I could dribble. I wasn't the biggest bloke. I was probably one of the smaller ones, playing an age up as well. So physically, I would, if I was caught in battles one-on-one or with a player next to me, more often than not, I'm getting pushed off the ball. So for me, at that early age, it was trying to work out, right, well, how do I get away from this guy? How do I not get, caught where the guy is close enough to push me off the ball? And it was those little things that that helped me develop my game from a young age. So I would say up until about that under 11s age, playing park football, yes, I probably stood out a little bit. Again, being quick and getting on the end of things and scoring goals, always catches the eye. But then when I moved into rep football, that's at that, 11, 12, 13-year-old starting to develop physically. I had guys as a 12-year-old, full-blown moustache and beard, and I'm this skinny kid with nothing on my face, So I was a late developer from that moment on. So I again, in terms of speed, I dropped right back down. Compared to everybody else physically, I was still quite small. So from about under 12 to 16s, I'd say even 15s, I was right. I didn't make any state teams really, or considered anywhere near one of the best for my age. It wasn't till, I'd say under 16s where I then shot up physically and had a really strong year. I scored a fair few goals for the under 16s team back then, and then making, like I said, that progression up into the National Youth League. Had a good season for the Marconi Colts team, and then went to the AIS. So it was just very quick from under 16s level. It was like under 16, 12 to 15s, where I'm nowhere near one of the better players for my age, to shooting up, and all those things that I'd been able to work on, to avoid the physical side of the game and those confrontations, keeping the ball away from players and making, certain runs, trying to outsmart defenders, all those sorts of things, that I had been developing up until then. Under 16s, I shot up physically, I got quicker, great season. Then I went to National Youth League, had another really strong season, and then went to the AIS and then came back to first grade. So it all sort of just progressed really quickly from about 16. But up until then, yeah, just another kid, another sort of late bloomer, as there are a lot of kids who are, and a lot of parents sort of get disheartened and disillusioned a little bit when their kid isn't one of the best in their age group, thinking and asking me, how did you make it? It's always good, I guess, and reassuring for them to tell them that, that I wasn't anywhere near one of the best growing up. But, it's probably the fact that your kid's not in that, I guess, top selection of players at the moment means he's got to work harder at his game. He's got to look at certain things to make himself a better player, and that will hold him in a good way as he does get older, because the kids at 12, 13 to 15 that were the best, very few actually went on to have any career.
Yeah, it's a really good lesson, especially for younger fans listening to the pod, right? You're not always the one with the most talent is the one that goes all the way. Hard work usually pays off as well. And you mentioned obviously playing up against kids with moustaches at 13 years old. Did you decide, now's my time to, really grow out a beard?
That's it. My whole childhood, not being able to grow a beard, I thought that's enough. I'll teach these blokes.
Yeah, you touched on a couple of stints that you had overseas. You played in Belgium, Japan, the UAE, sorry. All different cultures, all different parts of the world. Out of the three, where did you enjoy playing the most? And did you learn a lot by playing abroad?
Oh, look, I learned a lot at both stages. The first time I went away to Belgium, I was, I think 19 or 20, very early on in my career. And back then, I left the old NSL. There was a year or two where the NSL basically stopped functioning as a league, and there was nothing really happening. And then the A-League started in 2005, I think it was. So up until the A-League started, I mean, the idea was that you came through, made a bit of a name for yourself as a young kid, and you went overseas, because in Australia here, you couldn't really make a career for yourself to really, push yourself and make a good career and earn some money. You had to go overseas. So I did what was, considered the norm, and what, was, I guess, that natural progression in a player's career, and struggled in Belgium. And look, you're prepared for it. You get told, like I said, I was at the OAS, and already all those things start to get you ready for it. You speak to a lot of people and players who have gone before you to get their thoughts and experiences from it. And I knew, regardless of what you've done here, and I sort of came off the back as well of winning, the Under-21 Player of the Year award twice in the NSL, and being spoken about, quite highly, knowing full well as soon as I go there, I'm back right to the very beginning. It's so cutthroat over there, and I'm coming here and taking, a local player's position potentially, and they obviously it's more of a fight. I think the game generally does mean more to players, young players coming through, because of how cutthroat it is and how big they understand the game is. I think for kids coming through in Australia, we're very spoiled in terms of lifestyle, and how many things there are to do in this country to keep you occupied. If you're not playing football, you're doing something else. And whereas over in, Europe, in South America, certain Asian countries, it is all about football, and that's the only way to literally put food on your table. So I think it's something we'll never have here, and something you can't teach into kids. But that understanding, becomes very apparent as soon as you step off that plane and take that first step not even onto the training session. Before, when you go into the clubhouse and you're meeting the players, you understand that it's business there, and it's big business, and you're seen as someone from the other side of the world in a country that, they don't even know that plays football, and I think it's obviously changed now, but back then it was a little bit different. So it was tough. It was very tough. And again, trying to earn that respect from coaches, from players as well. And then it's down to your ability and to your, confidence in yourself, to go out there and show them that you're a lot more than what their assumptions are and what they think of you. So, look, I enjoyed it in terms of a learning experience. I played, I think, maybe 16 or 17 games in that season. I because of the Olympics, I joined the team late, so I didn't do a pre-season. I came in about a month late, so started off already, up against it. My first game, I went down on a corner, tore ligaments in my ankle, was out for another month. So again, a young kid and you're straight in the treatment table, that never looks good. And then from there, just struggled to get game time, struggled to get the confidence from the manager to really play me and give me much of an opportunity, which is understandable, in that first season. And that's where I was faced with a decision at the end of that first year of, all right, do I stay? The A-League was about to start up. There was a lot of buzz around it. And I thought, okay, my other option is to go back to Australia and go again, try and rebuild, try and get some confidence back, and then potentially look at going overseas again. And look, my agent at the time and a few people were trying to get me to stay overseas. And then it's a part of the game, I think, that's underappreciated, to the general sort of public. And as a player who went abroad early, it's another part of a footballer that is so important, the mental side of it, the toughness, the days running around a pitch when you're injured overseas thinking, what am I doing here? My family's at home. I could be playing at home, and here I am, other side of the world. It's raining. It's snowing. It's cold. I'm not even with the team. Those moments, were really, really difficult. And to look at the careers that a lot of our best players in Europe have had, and to think that, they don't go straight to the Premier League, straight to the Serie A. It's years of grinding it out in those moments, in lower leagues, in small stadiums, bad change rooms, to eventually get to where they ended up getting, So I take my hat off to all those boys that are slugging it out and doing what they're doing and making a career overseas, because I was faced with a choice. Do I stay and do that, or do I go home? And for me, I chose to go home. And again, not a decision I regret, because I always was more comfortable. That was me, that the mental side of the game. For me, I was always more comfortable playing in that setting, in that environment of being at home, being amongst mates, like I said earlier. So that was where I got the best out of myself. I came back and played, another 5 years in the A-League before, trying to test myself and push myself again in Japan, which I eventually did. I was more mature at that stage, understood as well when it comes to a career, how short it is, and the financial reward in going to Asia, what that did as well, but also in going to Japan, in the fact that it was a step up, in terms of league, in terms of quality. And even that, I remember getting there in Japan, doing a couple of weeks and just thinking, and I am way out of my depth here. These guys are flying around me. I feel like I'm a witch's hat at training. I'm not, the game is passing me by. I'm barely getting involved. They're so sharp. They're quick. Their speed of thought, everything that we've seen, right? We've seen Australian teams in the Asian Cup, in Asian qualifying, Champions League. When they come up against the Japanese, it's frightening how good they are. So it took me a little bit of time to adapt to their style and to their speed of play. But, I eventually did and had 2 good seasons there. I loved my time there. And, 2 different times, I guess, there. From there, I went to the Middle East, and that was different again. Different style of football, different lifestyle as well. I think in terms of professionalism, nowhere near what the rest of the world is. I think that the players there are very spoilt from an income point of view and a way of life over there. The players are rolling up in Mercedes-Benz and Bugattis and all sorts of cars, and training a couple of times a week for an hour. They rock up to training 5 minutes before the session starts, and if they're not playing, they don't particularly care. So it's the foreigners that really drive those leagues, and that was hard. That was hard at the stage of the career that I was at, sort of in the Socceroos up until then as well. So balancing that decision. And when I look back, again, 3 really different experiences at different parts of my career, but all 3 enjoyable just in what it taught me and what it showed me being overseas, what it's like, different cultures, different styles of football. So all, very enjoyable.
I'm glad you mentioned that about the UAE, because no one really knows much about any of the football leagues over there, except the Saudi league now, of course, that now it's booming. All the countries over there have so much money. Like, what's stopping the UAE from doing the same thing, pumping so much money into football, getting all the superstars in there? Like, do you ever see that happening, or do you think like it's just like almost like an amateur league in the UAE, and you think it's just going to remain like that?
Look, I think while their population is what it is, and it's the majority of people that live there are foreigners, so they come in to work and then they leave. So not many people are there for a long time, and I just think they struggle to develop their youth players. I think in whether it's Iran or Saudi Arabia, football's a lot bigger in those countries. A lot bigger. You see the stadiums are full, and they love their football. So I think there's more of an impact had when your foreigners come in, and obviously the likes of Ronaldo heading over there helps that, but there is more of a passion when it comes to football, and you notice it in playing in Champions League when you go and play over there versus a UAE where you might get a couple hundred people. So look, whether the UAE or Qatar will ever catch Saudi or Iran, I'm not too sure. I think it is a league that is what it is at the moment. It's a place where they've tried to inject a lot of cash, bring some of the best managers in the world, some high profile players, but it's never really got going.
Moving on to your A-League portion now. So you're with Sydney FC for 10 years, over 200 appearances. What was it about the club that made you stay there for so long, and why was it the right place to hang up the boots at the end?
So I came back to the A-League, and I think back then in being a new league, they were quite strict on squad numbers. Every team had to have 20 players, and Miron Bleiberg, who was the Queensland Raw coach at the time, when I was considering coming back, was I think probably the only team who still had 19 players. And in speaking to me, he told me I've kept one spot for a player that may come out of nowhere, right? So I all the other clubs were full. So I had a good chat with him. A lot of my under-20s World Cup teammates were playing with Miron at Queensland at the time, or had already signed. So it was a good fit, So I went back and played there for a season. But Sydney approached me during that year about signing. And look, again, for me to come home and be able to play in a league which, in that first year of the A-League was incredible. The crowds were great. It really seemed as though finally Australia had, awoken this beast that we always talk about when it comes to Australian sport. We know how big it can be, and frustratingly so, we just haven't been able to capture that and grow it. We've had glimpses of it over the years. We've seen big crowds in derbies. We've seen how big the game can be. We just haven't really seen its full potential. So after year one, it felt like, here we go. And Australia's finally going to have a league that young players can come and make a career out of. So, for me to come and play at home for Sydney FC was very enticing. And, given the year that Sydney had that first year, the club that it was as well, I was really looking forward to coming home and being a part of the squad. And I spent 5 years at the club, and we had a mixed sort of bag of success and failure in those post Pierre Brosque years. Terry Butcher came in. It wasn't a great season. We lost a few players, brought in some other players, and we had quite a high turnover of coaches in those first few years. And then in my fifth season at the club, 2010, under Levitska, we ended up winning the league, and it just felt, again, the timing was right for me to go overseas and test myself in Japan. And then in coming back, I always said, because I actually sort of went to court of arbitration against Sydney FC. I had recently signed a contract to extend my stay at Sydney, but still had a clause under my current contract, which allowed me, if a club came and paid the club a certain fee, it allowed me to get out, and that's what happened in going to Japan. So Sydney, we went to court. Sydney tried to keep me. I tried to leave. At the end of the decision, I was there with Scott Barlow. We both stood up. He shook my hand. He said, "Look, no hard feelings. I understand why you're wanting to leave. I hope you understand why we want you to stay. Whenever you come back, the doors are open." And I always respected that. And again, the attachment that I'd already formed with the club, with the players, with the fans, I was always going to come back to Sydney. And even though, when I made my intentions clear that I was going to be, coming back after my second year in the UAE, I did have I got a phone call from Popper who spoke to me about potentially joining the Wanderers. It was a fairly easy decision. And while I thank Popper in, considering, having me there, my loyalties were with Sydney. I'd spent a long time there and always said that I'd come back. And that's exactly what I did. And then from that moment on, it was always, about staying at Sydney. I didn't think about joining other team. I always said when I came home, as long as the club wants me, I'll be here. When that day stops or when my body gives in, there won't ever be another club for me. And that's how it thankfully finished.
I believe you're still Sydney FC's top goal scorer. Is that right?
It is. I made sure they didn't renew Alfie Lafondra's contract last year so that he wouldn't overtake me.
I was in danger for a bit.
Yeah. It'll get overtaken one day. I think I was there 10 years as a striker. If that's not long enough to hold that record, just about every other one, Ryan Grant's overtaken me with matches played and just about everything else. So it is one record I still hold, and yeah, no doubt it'll be taken over soon.
Just on that, obviously, it almost got broken. I'm assuming you're still involved with Sydney FC. Do you see a lot of potential coming through? Do you think anyone in the future that you see now might overtake that record?
Oh, good question, right? Good question. Because, look, I think, again, the fact that I was there for so long, unless you get, a youngster who is happy to play out his career in Australia, then it'll be hard only because it's rare that players stay at clubs for that long. If you've got, again, a young kid, someone like Kaczarski could very easily overtake that record in 5-6 years if he gets regular game time. But once he starts getting regular game time, the hope is that he goes overseas and spends as long as he can overseas. So, or another player like Lafondra, who comes at a good age and can spend 4 or 5 years and can bang in 20 goals a season like he was. Within a couple of years, you're taking my record. So look, I don't know that there's anyone there at the moment who will, because I think whether it's a Segicic, a Kaczarski, I think they're good enough to go overseas and make it. If they don't, absolutely. If they stay and play for Sydney.
Alex, to play for your country is pretty special. To play one game is special. You've been lucky enough to play 21, I believe it was, for Australia. What was it like being around the national team? And do you remember when you first got your first call-up?
No, my first call-up I can't remember at all.
Must have been pretty special.
A great moment. I can't remember where I was, what I was doing, who it was against. You know what? I absolutely do remember. I do remember. So I was with the Olympic team at the time. So we were doing a camp in preparation, obviously, for the Olympics. And at the same time, the Socceroos and Frank Farina was coach at the time. Were they had a camp. They had the Oceania OFC Cup or something, I think, which was part of qualifying for the World Cup back then. So it was held in Adelaide, and it was sort of like a mixed training camp. So yes, we were training with the Olympic team. The Socceroos boys were doing their thing, but Frank Farina ended up mixing the two and getting us involved and actually playing us in some of those games. So, at the time, the squad was just stacked with crazy players. Brella, Bresciano, Schwartzy in goals. Cahill was coming through, Lucas Neal, all these guys. Emerton was there, and it was, for me, it was like, man, this is incredible. This is probably the best national team and best group of players we've ever had. And I'm training with them, hoping one day to become a regular of this team. But I learned very, very quickly, I guess, the difference, between where I was and where these guys were, both on the field and off the field. So on the field, obviously, I mean, you're seeing their quality, but you're seeing that, all right, I'm I can mix it with these guys and train well or whatever. We played a game and felt like I did quite well. I can't remember who it was against coming off the bench at the time, but had a good game, reasonably good game coming off the bench. And I remember the boys were heading out for a night out after the game. Mind you, we played again in 3 days' time. So a couple of us young boys tagged along, and we'll go out with all these guys playing in Serie A and Premier League. We're there, we're here. Anyway, I think the next game had a decent game again, and then started the third game and had an absolute stinker. I think it was against the Solomon Islands. Came in at halftime, got dragged. And I remember Arnie, who was Frank Farina's assistant coach at the time, just giving us an absolute, hammering on us as professionals and who, how dare we even consider ourselves anywhere near the quality of these guys, not, on the field. These guys, they've earned the right to do whatever they want, and they look after themselves. They know how to get the best out of themselves. And if they go out and can perform 3 days later, so be it. You're nowhere, we were nowhere near that. And it was a real eye-opening moment for me, and just brought me right back down to earth. I thought I was on top of the world at the time, playing alongside some of these legends, thinking, right, here it is type thing. I'm going to go and and very quickly came back down to earth and realised, right, because I think at that time I just signed a deal to go overseas as well. So I thought, right, fine, here I am playing well with these guys. Again, very quickly came back down to earth in that camp and understood, that you had to earn your way. And these guys had done exactly that. They'd been for overseas for years, and I was nowhere near where they were. So.
And you had it for a game. Was there a particular moment in Socceroos camp that you can think of, something funny that might have happened, something that really springs to mind?
Nothing. Look, I think it sort of used to crack me up because you, like I said, when I'm mentioning these guys' names, just how different they were and how normal they were. I I was in camp with Viduka one time, and just. He was so laid back, it's ridiculous. You're talking about a guy who's, playing for Leeds, playing in the Premier League, one of the best strikers that we've ever had, and just so casual, like any other bloke. If you saw him walking down your street, you'd think nothing. You wouldn't think anything of him, but such a beast on the field, such a nice guy, down to earth. And even at training, you looked at him at training, and yes, he had quality feet, like ridiculous, but you couldn't tell that he was playing at the level that he was because he obviously wasn't training. He wouldn't train at that intensity. It was, and some players were like that. Some players were so just casual, laid back, got what they needed to out of training. Other guys like Jason Chelina, he trained like he played. Every session was like a game, to the point that he used to piss everybody off. Just calm down. Yes.
Yeah. There's always one.
There's we're playing with you. And he was just so hungry and wanted the ball and give me the ball and was on to the next pass, and so busy that, between him and Dukes, completely contrasting people, and both incredible players in their own right. So it's sort of, again, understanding that everybody's different. Everybody does what they need to get the best out of themselves. But I mean, coming to breakfast every morning and seeing Schwartzy have a steak is something that I'll never. Here I am having, my Cocoa Pops and Nutrigrain together, and Schwartzy's having a, medium steak next to me with breakfast. So, again.
It's funny that you mentioned Viduka, because the boys actually had a podcast on with Danny Guthrie, who played with him at Newcastle. And he always said during training as well that once he was done with the game, he was completely going to switch off, move overseas, and he's done that exact same thing. He's opened a cafe and everything.
Yeah, look, lovely guy, and I think I was only in camp with him once or twice. Harry Kuehl as well, only once or twice. And look, these are two of the best that we've ever had. But yeah, I guess Viduka always had that sort of personality, and you could see it in him, as you do with a lot of players. Some players they're so driven and so love the game so much that they when they finish playing football, what's next, and how do they keep getting that high? And they turn to coaching and developing players and or managing players. And some guys are happy to never see the football ever again. They'll watch it every now and then, and that's it. So everyone's different. But yeah, look, definitely going into camps and learning and being with the quality of these guys, for me, every single time. I mean, I never took it for granted. I thought it was incredible to be alongside some of these guys.
You mentioned it earlier in the podcast about having a Uruguayan heritage. We've got to ask, when it was World Cup qualifier time, did you have two jerseys ready, or was it always the one answer, one decision?
The first campaign against Uruguay, I think, was 2001. I was actually at the AIS at that point, and I remember my old man jumped on a bus, met me in Canberra, and we continued on our way down to Melbourne. And we went with a few guys, South American guys, Uruguayan guys, right? So obviously they're super passionate about Uruguay, wanting Uruguay to win. And I'm the son of a Uruguayan now at the Australian Institute of Sport, looking to hopefully play for the Socceroos one day. So it was, I think, more so mixed feelings for my dad, right? The country that he was born in and felt so passionately about, and he's wanting the Socceroos to succeed because of what it'll do for his son. For me, look, there's no doubt that Australia was who I was going for. But the day of the game, we're down there in Melbourne. We were trying to see if we could go and see the Socceroos, and there was no way getting anywhere near them. The Socceroos, they went on their private walk. Wherever they need to, very focused on the game, on the job that lay ahead of them. And we heard that the Uruguayan team was going down to a park, and everybody can go and see them. And it was incredible. It was incredible. I took photos with Recoba, with the goalkeeper, a couple of famous players. And because we were going there, I put on a Uruguayan jersey, right? So obviously not stand out and to take photos with these guys. And it was, honestly, at that moment there, I understood what it meant to them. And it was funny, right? The Australians are trying to keep themselves away from everybody. They, and I think playing at home made it different as well. I think, if they played overseas, it would have been different. But seeing all the Uruguayan community go to this park to meet their heroes and see some grown men crying, taking photos with these guys, and seeing the connection that they had with the players and the understanding of the players of what it meant to wear that jersey, I'd never seen in Australia. I never understood it, and I just thought, you know what? And Recoba made comments 4 years later when we played them again, that it was their right, that it was the Uruguayans' divine right to be at the World Cup versus Australia. And as arrogant as those comments were, I understood it, because in 2001, I felt what it meant to the Uruguayan people, to the Uruguayan players. And I thought, we are still so naive as a country. We rolled out the red carpet for Uruguay, put them in a 5-star hotel, look after them, make sure they had security. Remember how they treated us when we went there? They wouldn't let our players sleep. They're spitting at our players at the airport, throwing rocks and all sorts at our buses. We were incredibly naive, and I think, obviously, you don't want to treat... There's a level of respect that needs to be had when it comes to sport, but that's what it meant to them at the end of the day. It's us or you. It's that simple. Yeah. It's us going to a World Cup, or it's you. So I understood it. In 2001, it was an odd feeling. I went to Melbourne, watched the game, and then saw how, what they did to us over in Uruguay. And just, I wasn't upset, because I thought, we don't deserve it. As much as I understand, and you look back at images of Vidmar, crying when he came off the field, and it's bordering disrespectful when I say we didn't deserve it when you look at those scenes, for the players, right? Because the players understood what it meant, and all the suffering of Australian teams up until that point, you understand that. But as a nation, I don't think we did deserve it. I think it meant more to Uruguay as a country than it did to us. So I wasn't upset, but then fast forward 4 years, and with what we've been through, the A-League had now kicked off, and the support that we were starting to give our local league, and the amount of, I guess, that had been invested into the game, the amount that, or what it now meant to Australia, it felt like 2004 was our time. Like we'd now earned the right to be on the world stage. I think as a country, we'd come a long way in those 4 years, both with what we'd done as the game, with the A-League, with how much we developed as a footballing nation, with where our players were currently at that time as well. We had an incredible group of players. When Aloisi steps up to take that penalty, and I'm getting goosebumps even talking about it, the feeling that I got then versus 2001, two completely different feelings. And when Johnny scores, I wasn't at the game. I gave the tickets to my parents to go and watch the game. I stayed. I was up in Queensland at the time and watched it at home. I just stood there in complete disbelief. I put my hands on my head. I'm watching Johnny run around the pitch. Always follow him. I'm crying. I just couldn't believe it. It was it had felt, like I said, it felt like we now belonged. Like we had gotten to this point. We'd earned the right to be at this point. We'd earned the right to be at a World Cup, and all thoughts and feelings towards Uruguay vanished completely.
Yeah, obviously we went a long way in just those 4 years, and we've still got a long way to go. Like even now, a couple of years back when we made the round of 16, we lost the next day. Like we see all the crowds at Fed Square in the city here in Sydney. Everyone gets around it, but like when we lose the next day, everyone's forgotten about it. Where if that's Uruguay, if that's Brazil, if they're losing in the round of 16, mate, you don't hear about it for the next 4 years, right? So
yeah.
Oh, look, I feel like the field we have developed a lot. I feel like it's the game in general, in the people that are in charge of growing our game. They haven't done that, and there's so much to do. There's so much to it's the most participated sport. We've got more kids playing our game than any other sport, yet rugby league and AFL are our two main sports, and we don't have people in positions of power, unfortunately, really pushing and driving our game and giving us the funding that we need, because we should be the biggest game in this country, and it can be, with the right funding, with the politicians giving us stadiums and not spending billions of dollars on a rugby league team in where are they trying to put a team? Is it Fiji?
PNG.
Yeah.
What are they looking at spending? Not billions of dollars, and it's for political reasons. When the Socceroos are playing China consistently, and politically, there's probably more we could be getting out of that, and we just don't do it well enough, unfortunately. So until we do that, and the people running our game put the game first as opposed to themselves, this game won't ever grow beyond where it is. When you look at someone like Mark Viduka and so many of our game's greats, why aren't they here helping? Because the help isn't wanted. And that's concerning. We should be doing whatever we can to get these guys back to help grow our game, to make this game as big as it can be. And people, unfortunately, are too concerned about keeping themselves in a job, and it doesn't really progress our game. So we'll get there hopefully one day, sooner rather than later, hopefully.
So it's good to segue to my next question, actually. We've had a lot of current A-League players on the pod, and it feels like they're the ones that are trying to promote it. The players are trying to promote the A-League. And I wanted to ask you about the second division that's coming in. Do you personally think it's a good decision having a second division in Australia?
I think it's fantastic. I think the hesitation to do it at the moment again is there's a lot of A-League clubs that don't want it to happen because they don't want the threat of being relegated down to a second division. They want their space in the A-League. They want to continue being there. What they don't understand is that the league is going nowhere at the moment. We're struggling from TV deal to TV deal to find out where the next injection of cash is going to be. And we got an incredible amount of cash, 160 million come from Silver Lake, so a huge injection. And where's it gone? Where has that 160 million gone? A lot of it was wasted on an app that never worked. So something that can separate our game from every other code is promotion and relegation. And I think the quicker the people, at the end of the day, like even that, you've got the FA that's going to be running the National Second Division. You've got the APL that's going to be running the A-Leagues. Are these two going to be able to work together for the good of the game to eventually bring in promotion and relegation? Look at the scenes with Preston and South Melbourne. 1,000 people. Look how many people Melbourne City who've been in the league for how long are getting 3,000 on the weekend. Mm-hmm. It's embarrassing. MacArthur's crowd. Now, MacArthur is a growing region and has a lot of potential. There's so many kids out there, and my sister lives out there, so they took their son out there, and the hope is that eventually, even though they were Sydney FC fans, and there's a lot of Sydney FC Wanderers fans, and they're trying to convert these people again into a new team, I think eventually MacArthur will be a great area and should be able to start selling out that stadium and grow their region. But there's other clubs that haven't been able to do that, and I think that's promotion relegation, because Preston will go and play someone else and they won't get that same crowd. So we understand that it's not every week, but there is enough interest in the NPLs that as soon as we can introduce promotion and relegation, again, those battles at the end of the year. So, for example, now, Mariners playing for nothing. Brisbane, 1 win all season. Perth, two wins all season. What are they playing for? Yeah. No accountability. No one to answer questions. Players. Again, there's nothing to play for in these last couple of rounds. If they had the threat of being relegated hanging in there in the balance there, you'd see more desperation. You'd see fans coming to want to lift their team to make sure they don't get relegated. Those relegation battles keep the league interesting at both ends of the table all year round. And I think that's really what can drive our league when it comes to crowds, because this is generally the time of year where we start to see a drop-off in crowds, which is why we need finals to get that kick again. Yeah. If you've got promotion and relegation battles in both the second division, obviously, and the A-League, it creates so much more interest, so much more narrative and storylines and heroes and villains for us to get around and talk about, which we don't get at the moment. It's boring. I mean, Perth are playing Brisbane. Who cares? Whether it's shown on TV, who cares? Yeah. It's a nothing game. Two teams that have been rubbish all year. No one wants to watch it. And then you wonder why we don't get those numbers. If Perth are potentially going down if they lose this week or if they lose next week, watch the numbers grow, because there's genuine interest in that actual game. I think that's what boosts numbers. That's what gets people to the stadiums, and that's what we need.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that actually, because I was thinking that before we came on, because the bottom teams, they've got absolutely nothing to play for. Relegation, like you said, they'll turn up. I was thinking about the NRL last year. They had it was an unofficial spoon bowl. The two bottom teams, fans went out to watch that because there was two garbage teams that didn't want to get the wooden spoon. It'll be the same thing in the A-League, right? If you got the relegation, people will come out. It'll be the only code in Australia that's actually got promotion relegation, then it will be a lot more exciting. So I hope we do get to that stage.
It's almost like lacking pressure, just somewhat. Players need that. I think just that little bit of a boost. See what happens down the line, I guess.
The thing is, it makes it more cutthroat, right? When it comes to, like I was talking about, what it's like in Europe and in Asia. If you're down the bottom of the table, there's so much pressure on everybody. There's so much tension, and you're playing for something. The guys now bottom half of the table, there's nothing to play for. There's no motivation for them. And the coach might come out like Jackson did on the weekend and say that players are playing for their future, but some of them are signed already for next year. So what's going to happen? So there's no motivation, no desire, no hunger, and that's the culture that we're brought up into. That there's no repercussions if you don't have a good season. So we're not going to make the 6 this year. So be it. Everyone gets an award, and that's already what we're teaching our young kids. That they don't play for points up until a certain age because they don't want to offend anybody. They don't want to, show them what it means to lose a game. Everybody, they don't even take scores. Nothing. It's ridiculous. You don't teach a kid from a young age what it means to lose a game and what it means to not want to feel that feeling. Hold on, that didn't feel great losing. I want to win, so I'll do what it takes to win a game. You don't develop those street smarts that kids pick up and South American kids have in their blood. European kids have. There's so much. So that passion, that hunger, you can't teach into kids, and we're not teaching them that we're not exposing them to that from a young age. And then, again, young kids are watching, and the Mariners aren't this year going to make the finals. So a young Mariners fan is not seeing that it matters. Our team's not doing well this year, Dad. Oh, well, next year. Imagine they were playing to avoid a relegation.
Yeah.
It's different. And you're teaching the kid that they can't go down. They need to win this game. If they don't, we're in the second division next year. And you're changing the culture automatically.
Yeah, 100%. On a more positive note, though, second division does include your old side, Marconi, I believe. So you'll have a team to support in the second division.
Look, I'm a huge fan of the second division, as I've sort of made clear there already. But having my old club, Marconi, will be great. I knew with all this talk happening, Marconi was going to be there. It's one of the biggest clubs in Australia. Even for anyone to head down there, even now, the size of the club, the facilities that they have, the stadium that they have is incredible, and it's a beautiful place. So, I can't wait to see what they can do next year and see the fans turn out in big numbers.
There's some of those top clubs that have like a really great culture, the old school fans and everything, and that managed to keep it going. It's been amazing.
It will be. We've sort of gone away with that, and I understand why. It was starting to really, when you talk about culture and the different, you had Sydney United, the Croatians, Melbourne, Croatia, you had Marconi, the Italians, the Greeks, and everyone was sort of separated, and those sort of culture wars, I guess, are what made the league what it was, and the A-League tried to, bring everybody together. But in doing that, you lose the passion, and there's that side of the game that I feel if we can merge and bring together, makes our game even greater. And our game is special when you watch the derbies, when you watch the finals and you see big crowds and the sets of fans going at each other. Preston South Melbourne on the weekend. They're things that that NRL can't get, that AFL can't get. They don't have that tribalism, that incredible passion for the game that us football fans have and grow up with in watching other leagues. That needs to be here. Kids need to feel that going to our games.
But NRL do have Vegas, so maybe we need to introduce that for their first round. Now, we've had obviously a couple of technical difficulties here, so you've had a lot of time to think about who your coach's son nomination would be. So over to you, Alex. Who is your coach's son nomination?
Look, I'll give that to a good mate of mine. He was my roommate for so many years, and one of the, honestly, best blokes in football, Terry McFlynn. Really good size to 10. three different sides to Terry. There's Terry the footballer. There's Terry now the businessman in the footballing world. Obviously, he's doing great things with Auckland there, and again, when you see him on camera, presents very well, speaks very well. And then there's Terry McFlynn, the roommate, who sleeps naked, naked cartwheels in and he's just full of jokes. You know, he's a fantastic guy. So look, he probably give it to him because he's one of the best guys in every way. You know, you meet anyone who knows Terry, he's genuinely, you know, someone who's got always, you know, you as a mate or his family always come first, you know. And anything he does, he's passionate about. He treats people with respect. But he's also one of the hairiest human beings I've ever. So rolling around.
I love it. That's a finish off with a bang.
Not a good sight.
Well,
we're gonna have to get him on.
Terry, you heard it here first, mate. You got to come on now. Back yourself.
Yeah.
No car wheels, but if you come on,
Yeah,
no
clothes
on. Alex, thanks very much for sparing your time, and it's been a fantastic conversation. So thanks very much for coming up with the Coach's Son.
This was not meant